Welcome, everyone. Um, this is our online forum called Water Everywhere in Lake County, but how many drops to drink? My name is Jane Hepting, and I'm president of the Lake County Conservation Council. Susan, can you hear me okay?
Yes, everything is great.
Wonderful. You know, we often hear about threats to our drinking water supply, such as saltwater intrusion from the coast, increased demand due to rising temperatures and a growing population, and dwindling supply due to loss. I'm going to ask everyone to please mute themselves because we're getting a lot of noise. Uh, we have, we worry about certain things like a dwindling supply of water due to loss of open space, which of course decreases aquifer recharge. So I'm hoping we can learn tonight if our drinking water supply is at risk now or will be in the future, and if so, what we need to do about it. Um, so I hope everyone is staying muted until we ask you to unmute. LCC's general membership meeting will be held immediately after this program, and everyone is invited to stay on the line for that meeting. Part of that meeting will be devoted to open discussion when we can hear your concerns about environmental matters. For our forum, Susan Feder will monitor the chat box. Please place in the chat box any questions you have. We will try to address those questions later tonight. Our forum will be moderated by Deborah Shelley. She is a retired limnologist, which is a scientist who studies inland bodies of water, including wetlands. When she worked for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, she was responsible for aquatic resource management on more than 20,000 acres of sovereign submerged lands that span nearly 70 river miles. In 2016, she was awarded the Jim Stevenson Resource Manager of the Year Award, one of Florida's highest environmental honors. Currently, she is president of the Aquatic Preserve Alliance of Central Florida and a board member of the Friends of the Wekiva River and the Aquatic Preserve Society. Thank you, Deborah, for lining up this forum. And I know you have some very knowledgeable guests to introduce. So take it away.
It helps if you unmute. Hello, everyone, and welcome, everyone. I'm so pleased to welcome our three speakers. First, Deirdre Irwin with the St. Johns River Water Management District, Jim Peterson, also with the Water Management District, and then Mike Clyburn with Friends of the Wekiva. So I'm so pleased to introduce our first speaker, Deirdre Irwin. Deirdre is the Central Florida Water Initiative Water Conservation Coordinator for the St. Johns River Water Management District. Deirdre has over 32 years of experience with the district. She has worked with the agency's Surface Water Regulatory Program, the Water Resource Education Program, the Certification Program Development, and also water supply planning. Deirdre works closely with Water Management District staff in the development of regional water supply plans, and she also coordinates a regional utility conservation coordination network. Deirdre serves on the statewide Florida Friendly Landscaping Advisory Committee. She also serves on the board of the Florida Green Building Coalition and also on the board of the National Green Builder Coalition. Green building, keep that in mind. We will have to ask Deirdre to come back and do a presentation on that topic. Very interesting topic. Deirdre is the 2024 recipient of the Alliance for Water Efficiency Water Star Award. The Alliance for Water Efficiency, or AWE, Water Star Award recognizes individuals who have made a significant impact on water efficiency, conservation, and sustainability. This award is given to individuals who are dedicated, passionate, and have progressive approaches to the field. and who often work quietly behind the scenes.
Me, just one sec. Okay. So I always like to start by explaining a lot of folks don't always understand the role of the district with regard to growth, development, and water issues. And essentially, our mission statement is to protect our natural resources and support Florida's growth by ensuring the sustainable use of Florida's water for the benefit of the people of the district and the state. So it's really important to understand our mission is not to affect growth, change growth patterns. It is to assess the water supply, the natural systems, and ensure we have adequate water supply. And I include this picture because as the years have gone by, it's really a balancing act between protecting natural resources and ensuring adequate supply for the people of the district. So our core missions, you're probably all familiar. We deal with those water supply issues, water quality. We have a huge staff of folks who go out and measure water quality in all our water bodies, and we assess how they're doing. Natural systems protection and flood protection. Natural systems includes the over 500,000 acres that we own and set aside for protection. Right now, flood protection is a big one. We're still dealing with a lot of standing water in the district. And I work in the Apopka office. I just moved there a little over a month ago. And it's the compliance folks are just nonstop dealing with flooding issues still. So Florida, people who move here, especially from out west where they actually have topography and hills, are used to water rushing away. Because we're so flat, it just sits for a long time. So it can take a while to explain that to people. So one of the hard things about explaining the need for water conservation in Florida compared to Western states and a lot of other places is that there's an appearance that we have an abundant supply with 54 inches of rain, many lakes, rivers, the largest concentration of springs. Why would we ever need to conserve water compared to out west? So what I like to explain is that our traditional source of water is the Floridan aquifer. We still have about 90% of our water coming from that source. That source is becoming constrained. Yes, we have all these other water bodies, rivers, lakes, rainfall, but our traditional source of water is constrained throughout the district. Florida statutes talk about, and I think this is remarkable because many states don't have it, and this was put in our statutes many years ago, that, and I'm going to read just this one statement aloud. When it's determined that existing sources of water are not adequate to supply water for all and existing future beneficial, reasonable uses and to sustain water resources, we have to do what's called a regional water supply plan. Our entire district is now doing regional water supply plans. We now know we do not have adequate supply to provide water to all of the people in Florida and that are coming to Florida in the future. So these water supply plans look forward 20 years and they take into account the current available supply, the projected water demand, and the needs of the people who live in each region, the growth, population growth that's likely to occur, and it really evaluates very closely the alternative water supply options for the region. So it's, and that's the department I'm in. It's a very, very dedicated group of people who are working to work on these 5-year plans, and every 5 years or 20-year plans, every 5 years they are updated. When a water supply plan is approved by our governing board, it immediately impacts the comprehensive plan of the entire region. Have to reflect in a certain time period the existence of a regional water supply plan and how that region is going to address water shortage. It also affects the utilities are responsible for doing a utilities work plan by statute in Florida, demonstrating where they get their water from, where they're going to get it in the future. The existence of a regional water supply plan affects the water utility facilities plan. So there's this triggering effect when we pass one of these plans. So these are planning regions. Now this slide is overlapping two things. We have these regional water supply plans, North Florida region, which actually goes into Swanee River. It's a region with Swanee because the impacts in the region we're seeing are along here in the western part, the Ichotokee, Santa Fe, and Keystone Lakes. CSEC, which is the Central Springs East Coast, goes from Marion, half of Lake, and we're going to talk about both, all the way down to Indian River, Brevard, that region. The area I'm working in now for the last month, and I'm still getting up to speed on all of it, is what we call CFWI, Central Florida Water Initiative. It includes regions of South Florida, Southwest, and St. John's. And we have oversight in this water supply plan from DEP because it's multiple districts, as does the North Florida plan has oversight in developing the plan with DEP. The other thing overlapping on this drawing are the basins. Our new basin managers have been assigned and are working on their plans. And that's why I asked Jim to be here so he could share with you. This green area is the Ocklawaha River Basin, and he'll be working closely with water supply folks, but also looking at the surface, not just the water supply issues, but the surface environmental issues. So Lake County includes Ocklawaha, and it also includes two of our water supply, CFWI and the CSEC. CSEC then is Marion, Northern Lake, Volusia, all of that area. It includes 6 outstanding Florida springs, 3 MFLs, minimum flows and levels prevention recovery strategies. And it's extensive planning area. The plan that was published a few years ago shows that we, surprise, surprise, like all our other areas, we're going to see an increase in population. Projected water use is going to increase in all of these categories. So the blue is public water supply, green is agriculture. So we map out population, how much water in each of these categories is going to be used or needed and projected. So this plan tells us that there's going to be an increase in projected demand of 75 million gallons per day. Sorry, that cannot be met with groundwater alone without harmful impacts to the MFL water bodies, groundwater quality, and wetland areas. Some of the projects that we're looking at in this region, or some have been completed and we're looking at additional ones, we continue our work with alternative water supply like reclaimed water, funding reclaimed, stormwater, surface water, aquifer recharge, and water conservation. The picture on the left is the Melbourne reverse osmosis plant, which treats brackish groundwater and surface water from Lake Washington. And the picture on the right is the Ocala Wetland Recharge Park. It's a really expansive, if you're ever in Ocala, go visit. Really great birding place, and it's got trails all through it, and it helps recharge water back to the aquifer. Those projects were developed with district funding, DEP, and local funding to help address the water shortfall. Then moving on to the Central Florida Water Initiative, you remember these are 20-year plans that are renewed every 5 years. We're getting very close to publishing the 2025 plan. Yesterday was actually the steering committee were presented with the initial results from this 2025 update to the plan. And this region, as I mentioned, covers Seminole, Orange, half of Lake, Osceola, Polk counties. So, yeah, it's a collaboration between the 3 districts with oversight from DEP. The population, and this is the new data for the 2045 plan, shows increase in population through 2045 and an increase in the water use projected that will be needed in the region. And I have a little more detail on that. So here you can see public supply, for instance, in 2020 was 406 MGD. By 2045, they're looking at 642. And then you've got all of the traditional water users and, oops, sorry, I moved my mouse and it popped up the slide. And it's showing a significant 41% increase in demand of water. The population, a 40% increase in population. And this is interesting. I think it's interesting. A 5% decrease in agricultural acres projected in this region. You know, when you think of the level of growth, maybe it's not surprising. The farms are selling out to the subdivisions. So the minimum MFLs, or minimum flows and levels in this region, these are the sensitive water bodies that we're analyzing closely, are the Wakava Basin, Lake Sylvan, Apshwa, in South Lake County. The priority list for new MFLs are Lake Apopka, Lake Griffin, and Burrell Basins, which include Beauclair, Dora, Eustis, and Harris. We have spent considerable amount of money over the past number of years. I didn't have time to get the 2023 numbers, but cost sharing funding for projects. We have 109 projects that we've funded in district-wide agricultural, the low-income ready, innovative, alternative water supply, and some various other springs projects in this region to try and improve both water quality and water conservation. Oh, I just lost my mouse. It's not behaving. Sorry about that. My mouse was not behaving. I really like to share this slide because it's really hard to imagine how much water this whole region uses. Every year, the district puts out a water use report. And we've got a really nice kind of a story map that explains who's using the water, how much they're using. So this is pretty new, hot off the press, the results of the 2023 total water use. So for our district, it's over 1,000 million gallons per day. This pie chart year over year gets really interesting. I remember when ag and public water supply were the same size in the pie chart. And now public water supply is at 60% of total water use. This isn't allocations, it's actual use. So you can see that whole report on our website, but I think it's important for folks because we have a lot of people who don't understand who's using the water, who have it in their heads that bottled water is using all our water. The analysis we've done shows that bottled water uses less than 0.1 of 1% of our water use. So, it's important to understand where the water is actually going. So based on all of these things I've shown you with the water supply plans, the threats to the various MFL water bodies, both the district and the legislative mandates tell us that water conservation is one of the most important actions we can take to sustain our current water supply and possibly delay the more expensive alternative supplies. I'll get into a little more detail on all of that, but drilling down a little more on water conservation, our primary focus is outdoor water use, is irrigation essentially. Indoors, we've seen tremendous improvements over the past 10-15 years with the improved plumbing fixtures, toilets, faucets, showers with the EPA WaterSense program. If you go in a Home Depot now, you can't buy something that isn't WaterSense. Clothes washers, huge impact. Clothes washers used to be equal to toilets, and they've come down significantly with the Energy Star labeling and water efficiency. But outdoor is where our focus is. Some data we got from UF has confirmed what we kind of knew already based on this tool called H2O Save, which I'll talk more about in a little while. About on average for the homes they analyzed the data of, which is well over 1 million homes at this stage, over 55% of the average household is outdoor water use. And that's when it's potable water, drinking water. When it's reclaimed, it can be as much as 75% when it's reclaimed, because that's exempt from irrigation restrictions. So even though reclaimed, historically, it's been a disposal process to use reclaimed water for irrigation, now it's becoming a valuable resource. So it also needs to be conserved, so those uses can be spread out. If there was any doubt about what's causing the increase in water use, I think this table will tell us. This is gathered by detached homes in Gainesville, Florida. They used to track which homes installed an automatic irrigation system and what their water use was. And look, around 1990, the number of automatic irrigation systems started going up, and they have since stopped recording because every single new home is built with an automatic irrigation system, and you can see the corresponding water use. So we know where the low-hanging fruit is, essentially. So when we get to these, when we talk about these alternative water supplies and water conservation, we kind of have to talk dollars and cents. It's really about the cost of what production of these alternative supplies. So water conservation, based on data we've gathered from a really detailed analysis done in North Florida, is about the cost of a robust water conservation program is about $1.25 to $2.50 per 1,000 gallons. Our current water supply is a similar cost. The minute we start going to reclaimed lower Floridan, which is now a really commonly used source in Florida, surface water, brackish, and we don't have any seawater being used in our district, the costs rise just immensely. And those costs are going up every year because of the cost of building and production of these sources. So the math shows it makes sense to constrain our water use in order to delay the development of these sources, which we have to do. There's no more avoiding them. Every single utility is starting to look at their alternative sources and where they're going to get their water supply from. So then when we speak about alternative sources, Florida is one of the most advanced states in the nation for reclaimed water. For beneficial use of wastewater is another way of thinking about it. We have tremendous amount of our water is used in public reuse, golf courses, other direct reuse, groundwater recharge, but still a chunk of it is still being used surface water discharge or other disposal. But we're way ahead of other states. We continue to work on getting more and more reclaimed out there. There are a number of pilot projects around the state that are looking at treating reclaimed water to drinking water standards and blending it with water from the aquifer. That's called potable reclaimed. So instead of putting 2 lines out to a house, one for reclaimed water, one for potable, which is really expensive, the idea is that you treat all the wastewater at the facility. It gets injected into the aquifer, brought up again, retreated again, and just 1 line sent out to all the homes. So that's one of the ideas being evaluated. One thing to keep in mind, this is an environmental organization, is that there are pros and cons. It's good that we're using this reclaimed water, but we know that it's nutrient-laden water, and that if it's really important to have an efficient, well-designed irrigation system to minimize the runoff of reclaimed water into ponds and other water bodies. So a lot of our communities see increased algae in their ponds when it's reclaimed. So a lot of that is about the irrigation. So we teach a lot. This is from my irrigation training slide for HOAs. We teach a lot of the strategies to minimize runoff into ponds if you have reclaimed water. So then when we drill down on irrigation, now I need to move a little faster for you guys, but essentially we have a hierarchy. We need good design and installation. Remember, in Florida, there's no licensing required for an irrigation professional. There's no statewide mandates for irrigation systems. There's a voluntary appendix for irrigation design, and then there's a patchwork of county codes that are implemented at varying levels. And there's a voluntary license, nothing mandatory. So that kind of explains why we have so many bad systems. Correct scheduling of the system, frequent maintenance, and upgrading. So irrigation is complex. You got to attack all of these things. And we're doing that in a lot of different ways, which I probably won't get into today. Our biggest tool in the toolbox for conservation is consumptive use permitting. All water supply applicants shall implement either a standard water conservation plan or a goal-based water conservation plan per rule in our district. So these water conservation plans, typically a utility conservation plan, has to include an education component, outdoor, indoor, a water loss program. They have to evaluate how much water they're losing in their system and how they're going to address that, and a water conserving rate structure. So those different pricing you see in rates is required in our rule, and that's part of what we evaluate when folks come in for a permit. This is an example of a water conservation plan. This is my sample that I send out to everyone. They're supposed to tell us exactly what they're planning to do, the frequency they're going to do it, and how it's going to be implemented. And then they have to do compliance reports as part of their permit. So I won't go into detail on that. That's a whole other training. Deborah asked me to include a little bit of information about 5 cities in your region in Lake County and their ground. So in every permit has an allocation, how much water they're supposed to use. So this is the groundwater allocation and the actual use. Several of these cities are in-house for permit renewals. So because of the growth in Lake County, it's become very challenging for them to stay within their permits. And we're addressing that by bringing them back in-house to modify or figure out where the alternative sources are going to come from to address this water use. Another tool in the toolbox is year-round irrigation restrictions. A lot of people think they don't work. They do, if they're enforced. So we're working with all our local governments, and in Lake County, there's several that are very good, Claremont in particular, at enforcing the irrigation restrictions, getting everyone on the 2-day and 1-day-a-week rule. Some other tools we have are the H2O Save tool from UF, which is a geospatial database. They partner with the utilities and they allow the utility to see well, actually I have more information on the next slide on that. Let me hold off. There's a lot of research being done right now in UF, social science research on how water is being used, perceptions of irrigation water use, and this one table I really like, the likelihood of enacting certain conservation behavior changes. The #1 item was following water restrictions. So there's some really good data that tells us how this should be done and how we should influence behavior change. The H2O Save tool then, this is an example of their Gainesville map. They color code all the homes based on their water use, which makes life so much easier for the utility to focus on those high water users. And they do compile graphs and tables about who are the high water users are. You can see this one is a little old, but the high water users in Gainesville are using up to 400 gallons per household per day. And most of them have irrigation systems. This tool is being used now throughout the state. Not so much in Lake County, but we're encouraging its use with the utilities there. So wrapping up, it was just me for many years doing water conservation. We now have 3 of us. I do CFWI. Gretchen does Smith is the CSEC region, but we overlap, so we work a lot together. And Craig McLean, whom some of you might know has been with the district forever, is covering the North Florida region. And that is my second to last slide. I really like to use this one to show Florida is a combination of flooding and water waste. You can see the irrigation system running and the street is flooded. And that is it for me. Hopefully I didn't go too far over my time. And I will stop sharing.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Deirdre. Do you have some questions? There are some questions in the chat box. So Susan, were you going to go through the questions?
Yeah, let's see if we can go through them. I think a couple of them may not be inside of your area of expertise, but maybe you can give us a pointer to a resource or something. The most recent question is about golf courses that we have in our area. They require daily dependence on water. Would they place some kind of regulation on golfing communities and golf courses?
Yeah, golf courses need a permit just like everyone else. And we work with the Florida Golf Course Superintendents Association. They actually started coming to us to know what else can they do, because there is a perception that they use a lot more water than a residential community. The production of turf grass for golf purposes is extremely precise. Too much will destroy the grass, too little, and the course doesn't look good. So they are extremely attentive. Florida has golf course BMPs that are mandated now for both water quality and water quantity. And that industry is actually where the early adopters of reclaimed water, and a lot of them use reclaim now. So in terms of priorities, who our targets are, yes, we always make them do conservation. They got to have smart controllers, smart pumps, and be very efficient with their water use. But compared to residential homeowners, they're not using nearly as much water.
Okay, and I think you used the term BMP. Did you touch on that? That's best management practice?
Best management practices, yeah. University of Florida has led the way nationally in developing golf course BMPs that are now mandated in Florida.
Okay, great. So the next question is, can you touch again on the municipal tiered water pricing? Groveland is very restrictive to highly tiered, was very resistive to highly tiered consumption structure. Theirs is tiered, but it's pretty gentle, especially for the top residential users. As the public, yeah, so can you touch a little more on that?
Yeah, we're working with a lot of those cities, and Groveland, I think, has just come in for a permit renewal, and we're urging all of them. I'll be honest, it's a fine line we walk. The rule talks about a water conserving rate structure. So when we analyze those, we compare water at 4,000 gallons per month and 20. 20 is a high water user. And we want to see the cost of water per kgal at 20 be much higher than 4 for a low water user. So we are nudging them very strongly to adopt some higher rate structures in Lake County. So that, stay tuned, because we're in those conversations right now.
No. Okay. Okay. Regarding HOAs, what can you do to help curb their demand and the fact that they demand their residents have pristine lawns or get violations?
I talk about irrigation being our target. Our number 2 target is HOAs. We run quarterly webinars. So HOAs are managed by management companies, and there is a licensed professional in those companies called a CAM, Community Association Manager. And CAMs are required to get CEUs every year. So we developed a training class for CAMs on irrigation efficiency. The reality is these folks know very little about a well-designed system and a well-maintained system. They're juggling fences and fountains and keeping their board happy. So we've worked with the University of Florida, with the other water management districts to really target HOAs. Just last week, we attended the HOA Expo in the Orange County Convention Center. We go every year. And this year, because they've been attending our webinars, they were lining up to have us come speak to their residents. So we help them write better contracts with their maintenance companies. So the HOA hires a maintenance company that only does what's in the contract. So if it's a poorly written contract, they're not maintaining the irrigation system well. They're not changing out rain sensors. They're not looking at smart controllers. So we help them with writing better contracts to demand better maintenance of the irrigation systems. So I think we're making a headway based on what I saw last week. The maintenance companies, the HOAs, and the board members were begging us to come out to their communities. So I think we're going to have a busy year. And I am going to bring the water conservation coordinator from each city with me, along with the extension Florida friendly person. They're partnering with us on this to try and get the word out.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, Veronica asked, why wouldn't public allocations match use?
The allocation is for a certain, it takes into account a certain high level of water use if there's a drought. So sometimes it's lower because the city might be growing more slowly than they predicted, rarely the case in Lake County. They might, we have one or two that have done so well at water conservation, they stay well under their allocation all the time because they've been implementing programs. It might be higher because of prolonged drought, of just growth got away from them. So there can be a number of reasons.
Okay, good. And Deborah, how are we doing on time? Do we need to move on to the next speaker?
Oh, yeah, sorry, you guys didn't, am I on mute? I think we're good on time. Do we have any more questions? I have two quick questions.
We do, but we also have two more great speakers, so I want to make sure we're balancing out.
We can do some more after that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, are we ready for our next?
Yeah, let's move. I think you're the timekeeper. If we can do more questions here for Deirdre, that we've got a couple more, but if we need to move on, I just wanted to check.
Okay. Do we have time for two more questions? I have two quick questions.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Deirdre. I had a quick question on your slide about the cost of the various water systems. Does the lower cost of reclaimed water include the construction of the facility?
Yes, that is the average production of that source.
Okay, cool. And one question on minimum flows and levels, which is related to minimum flows and levels are related to water quantity. And you mentioned there are recovery strategies if it's determined that if there's not enough water. Are there any systems that are actively in where a recovery strategy is currently being implemented?
Yes, and I do not know a lot about the MFLs. I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
I'm hoping Mr. Calborn can talk about that based on the meeting that he attended on the MFLs, but there's some significant projects being evaluated for CFWI, and then some of the ones you saw pictures of are part of the recovery strategies.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Did you want to save the rest of the questions for later so we can do Jim and then Mike?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Cue Jim Peterson's slides. And while I'm discussing or giving him an introduction, which is a short introduction. Jim Peterson is an environmental scientist with the St. Johns River Water Management District. Jim worked on the upper Ocklawaha River Basin chain of lakes here in Lake County for over 30 years as a field program supervisor. And most recently, Jim serves as the Ocklawaha River Basin Strategic Coordinator. And Jim is a Lake County resident, yay! And Jim's going to talk a little bit about the Ocklawaha River Basin strategic plan and what's happening with the Ocklawaha Basin. Thank you, Jim.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yeah, and you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, great, great. Well, my name's Jim Peterson. I'm the Ocklawaha River Basin Coordinator, and the district changed their structure last year and formed 4 basins for the St. Johns River Water Management District. And so you can see on this slide, we basically have lower basin because St. Johns River flows south to north, lower basin, upper basin. If you can see my pointer, we have middle basin and my basin, which is the Ocklawaha River Basin. So Lake County is partly in the Ocklawaha River Basin, and then the north section of the county is actually in Middle Basin. So we form these four basic planning basins to support kind of increased focus. So if there's issues just relating to that particular area, we can focus more on those. And then these basins, each basin coordinator will make a strategic plan that will actually be incorporated into the St. Johns River Water Management District strategic plan. There's 4 basin managers, and they've all been working on their plans this year. And I was just going to go briefly over kind of what my plan is for the Ocklawaha River Basin. Go to the next slide. So for the Ocklawaha River Basin, basically have four main priorities, and these are water supply and MFLs. So this ties in perfectly what Deirdre was just speaking about. For our water supply, our focus is to continue the work already underway in conjunction with our regional water supply coordinators. As Deirdre mentioned, there's 3 water supply plans that fit into the Ocklawaha River Basin. But mostly for Lake County, there's 2 water supply plans. And this is to meet our future demands while protecting the water resources. The foundation of water supply planning is conservation, which Deirdre is a critical part of, along with alternative sources such as reclaimed water to help stretch traditional freshwater supplies. And we also want to protect our springs and other water bodies through development, implementation, and monitoring of minimum flows and levels. Go to the next one. So looking at some of the ongoing initiatives and projects, we've got regional water supply plans which cover the Ocklawaha River Basin, and staff continue working diligently to implement the goals of those plans. The district staff hold meetings with local agencies, encourage water conservation, which includes efficient irrigation and minimization of potable water use, as well as the development of alternative resources. So what she just mentioned, Deirdre, in her talk, we have to look for the future. We have to look at alternative sources of water to keep that, to meet that demand. We're looking at Southern Lake County. It's seen tremendous growth, and we will be looking in more detail, trying to find alternative sources of water for irrigation. Currently, there's quite a few consumptive use permits that are mainly for water consumption and not irrigation. So we'll be looking at that in the future. We also have we have a current artesian well plugging program, which has been very successful. the minimum flows and levels, which Deirdre mentioned as well, they determine the limits at which further water withdrawals would be significantly harmful to the water resources or ecology of an area. So for our area, they're working on several minimum flows and levels for this upcoming year or two, and that is Johns Lake, which drains into Lake Apopka. We're looking at the entire upper Ocklawaha River Basin chain of lakes. I think Deirdre also mentioned this. This will include Apopka, Beauclair, Dora, Eustis, Griffin, Harris, and also Lake Weir, which is not in Lake County, but that's in the Ocklawaha River Basin. And that's basically all I wanted to talk about today that kind of ties into what Deirdre already covered. And I'll be open for questions about the basin or Lake County.
Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
That was great. Any questions for Jim?
I have a question, Jim. What is the Water Management District role in the whole Free the Ocklawaha movement and the efforts to get the Rodman Dam and Reservoir restored back to its natural state?
Well, we are not the agency or the I guess the group that would be in charge of removing the Rodman Dam if that decision's made. The district does do quite a bit of sampling and research in that area. We did do a survey, I believe it was about a year or two ago, which I can stop my sharing now, which looked at what the public opinion was on Rodman Dam, and that was provided to the Florida legislature. So the Florida legislature would make that decision on whether or not to remove Rodman Dam. There are pros and cons. There's an avid fishing group that enjoys the Rodman Dam Reservoir, which has been created when the Rodman Dam was put in place, and the environmental groups would like to see that removed and allow free flow through the Ocklawaha River in that section, and they think that it would allow a lot more wildlife, including manatees, to access Silver River and Silver Springs.
Yeah, that would be good. Okay.
The other thing to be aware of with the Ocklawaha and the district's position is that we're actually most likely going to be the agency responsible for issuing a permit if one is needed to remove. So we can't, as an agency, have an opinion. We have to look at the permit application and evaluate the efficacy of that and the environmental impact. So we try to stay mute on that issue.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that was kind of my question. So now we know your role is to evaluate whatever everyone else decides.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I think I've got a good group for you here. Good work, including the Palatka Creek system all the way to Polk County and the Eustis system, including Trout Lake and upstream to Loch Laven, because many problems are happening in Eustis, and we need to do much to protect the Palatka watershed. So that's great.
Okay, yeah, that's part of the basin. Yeah, so Palatka River is one of the headwaters. Actually, it starts down in Green Swamp and Lake Louisa, and then Lake Apopka is also another headwaters. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, Jim, if I can have just a second, I really want you to pay special attention to the Palatka. We're experiencing another flood event here due to a lot of rain down in that swamp area. As Deirdre said, it is not a flashy system. It takes weeks for that water to flow from down there to the north. And a lot of people are doing knee-jerk reactions and want to have, very draconian solutions to flooding, which is obviously important if it's in your backyard or in your front yard. But we need to understand that the only source of water for the Claremont chain and the entire Palatka system is that rainwater. So thank you for your diligence, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Very
Okay,
good.
and then,
Any other questions for Jim?
one more question. The basins in that map correspond to the BMAP plan meetings that are going on now or recently?
Not sure what BMAP plans you're talking about. So typically, if an area or a water body is impaired, they have to have a basin management action plan, and it's more. I think it's even more a smaller area than the entire basin. So it would concentrate on a particular lake or a system. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then one last question that maybe you guys can answer or not can answer. Do you have a study or official non-opinionated read on whether the Rodman Dam is currently safe?
Well, I know it gets inspected, so there's engineers that are qualified to check it and inspect it, and I know there is an annual or biannual inspections and maintenance as required. So I know that occurs. So I guess we have to assume that those folks are doing a good diligent job of inspecting. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. We are running a little bit short on time, so thank you so much for your
Okay.
presentation, and we're going to move on to Mike Clybourne's portion, and then we'll come back and we'll field a few more questions for either of you, or how you guys best feel answering.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to introduce Mike Clybourne. I'm very pleased to introduce Mike. Mike is a board member of Friends of the Wekiva River. Mike is a retired environmental engineer. I really don't like to use the word retire. I use the word repurposed, and I will tell you how Mike is repurposed in a few minutes. Mike holds a master's degree in environmental engineering from the University of Florida. Mike worked 2 years for the Florida Department of Environmental Regulation. As some of you may recall, the Department of Environmental Regulation was rolled into the Department of Environmental Protection many, many years ago. Mike also worked almost 40 years as a consulting engineer. He worked in planning, designing, permitting, and constructing water supply and water reclamation facilities for Central Florida utilities. And some of his consulting was with Orlando Utility, Orange County, Seminole County, and the Toho Water Authority. Since retiring, Mike has been repurposed and very active in Friends of the Wekiva River. He currently serves as treasurer of that group. Mike previously served as the Friends of the Wekiva River representative on the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Advisory Committee for the Wekiva and Rock Springs Basin Management Action Plan. Mike also serves as secretary of the Florida Springs Council, which is an organization of springs protection advocacy groups. Mike, just a personal note, Mike is a wealth of knowledge. He has a firm grasp and understanding of all the complicated technical issues related to water quality and water quantity, and he has been a staunch advocate for protecting water quality and water quantity in Central Florida for many years. So without further ado, thank you, Mike, for speaking with us this evening, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks for having me, and I'll send you that $20 for the nice introduction. So I'm going to be speaking about the Wekiva River Basin because that's what I know about. And Lake County is an important part of the Wekiva River Basin. There's portions of the Wekiva Protection Area in Lake County, and it forms the eastern boundary of Lake County from just south of 46 up to the confluence of the St. Johns River. And even though the Wekiva Basin or Wekiva River is one of the most protected water systems in the state and the country, it still faces challenges from pollution, nutrient pollution causing algal growth, which is addressed in the basin management action plans, which I'm not going to get into tonight. That's a whole nother topic. But also challenges from groundwater withdrawals. these are some of the protections of the Wekiva River and the basin, starting back in 1988 with the Wekiva Protection Act that set up buffers between the river and development, and also set restrictions on land use intensity in the Wekiva Protection Area. It was also named as an outstanding Florida waterway, and then in 2000, it was designated by Congress as a National Wild and Scenic River. And then the Wekiva Parkway and Protection Act in 2004 added additional protections and dedicated some lands to conservation areas. It became an aquatic preserve in 2015. And then in 2016, Wekiva and Rock Springs were designated as outstanding Florida springs by the Florida Springs and Aquifer Protection Act.
Excuse me, Mike, just one quick comment, being an aquatic preserve person. An updated management plan was approved in 2015, but the Wekiva was actually designated in 1975, and it's having its 50th anniversary in 2025. That was the management plan in 2015.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No worries, thank you.
So there are two efforts that are underway to protect the flows and levels in the Wekiva Basin. The Central Florida Water Initiative, which Deirdre has introduced. It's a cooperative effort between the 3 water management districts that covers Central Florida. And then minimum flows and levels for the Wekiva River Basin. And a draft document was issued this past a year ago in November. It still has not been adopted, and we're working with the Water Management District on a recovery plan for the Wekiva River. So the Central Florida Water Initiative, as Deirdre introduces, to identify sustainable water supply systems for Central Florida, develop the regional water supply plan, and coordinate water use permitting between the 3 water management districts within Central Florida, so there would be consistent application of the rules across the Central Florida Water Initiative area. And this is the Central Florida Water Initiative area. As you can see, it includes all of Seminole, Orange, Osceola, Polk, and then the southern part of western Lake County. And the dividing line between Central Florida Water Initiative area and the Central Springs is just north of Apopka. There's a line between that and the Harris Chain of Lakes. So in 2020, the 3 districts issued the Regional Water Supply Plan, which is the latest version. And I appreciate Deirdre sharing the updated demand projections. I do not have that information. But this is the information that was in the 2020 Regional Water Supply Plan, that the estimated groundwater demand in 2020 would be 700 million gallons a day. And this is groundwater demand, not total water demand. And by 2040, it would be increasing to 862 million gallons a day. And the plan determined that the sustainable yield of the Florida aquifer, including the upper and the lower Florida and Central Florida, is only 760 million gallons a day. So these are the key findings, that the reason that the 760 is the sustainable yield is that Wekiva River and Wekiva Springs will not meet their current MFLs once withdrawals exceed 760 million gallons a day. And if you remember from the previous slide, the projected groundwater demand in 2025 is 753. So we're right at the cusp of the point where it would not meet the current MFLs. And the plan also documented that currently permitted uses of groundwater in the Florida aquifer is over 1 billion gallons a day. So it's about 40% more have been allocated than the aquifer can sustain. Recommendations of the plan were to limit withdrawals from the Florida aquifer to 760 million gallons a day, increase conservation to help reduce the 2040 demand by 50 to 55 million gallons a day, and use offsets to limit the impacts of withdrawals or implement alternative water supplies. These are some of the projects that were identified by the stakeholders and the Water Management District to help meet the projected demand. Lower Florida aquifer groundwater would be 114. Management strategies is an example of that is rotating the well fills so that they're not concentrated, the withdrawal is not concentrated in a particular area. And then we talked about the big one is surface water, which is primarily Taylor Creek and the St. Johns River. Plus, within the Polk County, it's the Peace River also. So they came up with projects that could generate 514 million gallons a day of additional water supply to meet the water demand. One cautionary is that under the state law, nothing contained in the water supply component of a regional water supply plan should be construed as a requirement for local governments to select that identified project. If the project's identified in this is taken from the CSEC, Regional Water Supply Plan, if they're not selected by the water supplier, the entity would need to identify another source to meet its future demands and advise the Water Management District of the alternate project. So this is one of our concerns is that there's not a requirement in the water supply plan to implement these projects that would be needed to protect the minimum flows and levels. As a result of the 2020 Regional Water Supply Plan and the findings of that sustainable limit, the DEP adopted a new rule for upper Florida aquifer withdrawal. It limits existing upper Florida aquifer withdrawals to the 2025 demand. And new or additional supplies after 2025 must find offsets such as reclaimed or stormwater aquifer recharge credits, which we talked about redistribution of withdrawals, and alternative water supplies like the lower Florida and brackish groundwater and surface water. The UFA, the rule also allows temporary withdrawals for up to from the upper Florida and for up to 20 years, which is one of the big things that we're concerned about because these the utilities can take up to 20 years to implement their projects. And these are some of the concerns that we Friends of the Wekiva River had about that rule, which we expressed to the Water Management District. Does not remedy the overallocation of groundwater. There's not enough emphasis on conservation, in our opinion. Does not limit withdrawals from the lower Florida. And we are concerned about that because withdrawals from the lower Florida can potentially affect the upper Florida, which would reduce spring flows. The upper Florida supplies the water to Wekiva and Rock Springs, which supplies 70% of the water in the Wekiva River at State Road 46. So this is the other effort that's underway to protect the flows and levels in the Wekiva River. The purpose is to define a minimum hydrologic regime at which further consumptive use withdrawals would be significantly harmful to priority water bodies. The current MFLs were developed in 1992 for the Wekiva River, Wekiva and Rock Springs, and 4 other springs in the basin. And the updated report, which covers all of these same water bodies, plus 2 other, the Little Wekiva River and one of the other springs, was issued by the St. Johns River Water Management District last November. And the findings of that are that the conditions in 2014 to 2018, the flows and levels or withdrawals, rainfall, that is the minimum flows and levels necessary to protect the ecosystems in the basin. It also noted that withdrawals have increased since 2014 to 2018. So therefore, the Wekiva River Basin is classified as being in recovery. And that means that a recovery plan has to be developed. The purpose is to identify measures to recover flows and levels to meet the MFLs. Target completion date is 2025. I'm hearing it maybe late 2025. And then the same potential measures that we talked about earlier, conservation, well management, offsets, and alternative water supplies. One of our biggest concerns about the recovery plan is the time to implement offsets and alternative water supplies, which typically take 10 to 20 years to build, to construct. I know personally that I've been retired 10 years now, and at least 4 years before I retired, Toho Water was talking about a Lower Florida aquifer wells that would draw brackish water and treat it to supply to augment their drinking water system. So that's been going on for 14 years. It's still not implemented. The well is in place, but they're still designing the water treatment plant. So by the time it gets built, it's going to be close to 20 years. And so these temporary withdrawals from the upper Florida can be permitted, can be allowed for up to 20 years. So our concern is the Wekiva River might not meet its MFLs for 20 years, especially if there's a drought situation. You know, we're fortunate right now that with all the rainfall we've been having, that the flows are up a little bit, but a drought period of a couple of years could change that quickly. And the other concern we have is allowing pumping from the lower Florida aquifer, which could reduce spring flows, as we discussed earlier. So here's what the Friends of the Wekiva River are doing. We're following the development of the recovery plan and engaging with the Water Management District to offer our support and opinions. Excuse me. We're reviewing consumptive use permits for groundwater withdrawals by local utilities in the spring shed. And we're monitoring consumptive use application for withdrawals from the Florida aquifer. Excuse me. And we're also monitoring developments in the spring shed to advocate for protecting the recharge areas. So here's some of the things that we can do. Reducing landscape irrigation. Like Deirdre pointed out, half of the water supplied for drinking water is used for lawn and landscape irrigation. If you think about it, that's a really big waste of resources to treat water to the point that you can drink it and then sprinkle it on the grass. So that's one thing we really need to focus some attention on. We can install we can follow the Water Management District's irrigation guidelines, and I know that's not happening in our neighborhood. We can install rain sensors. And, you know, I've seen my neighbors having their sprinklers going during a rainfall. So our homeowners association is not doing a very good job of promoting water conservation. We can also advocate for Florida-friendly landscaping and ask local officials to require Florida-friendly landscaping and to limit St. Augustine lawns in new development. Here's some resources if you want to know more about the Central Florida Water Initiative. Here's their website. We'd also urge you to go to the Friends of Wekiva website and sign up to be part of our group. We can always use some help, and you can join a great group. And then also, I'd recommend that you go to the Florida Springs Council's website and get on their mailing list, which is there's no cost. They do a great job of advocating for the springs, not only at the legislature, the state level, but also at the local level. So with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Oh, thank you, Mike. The first question we have is, who is responsible for building that water treatment plant that you mentioned earlier? And why is it taking 20 years to design and build?
Well, Toho Water is the lead for it. It's a cooperative effort between them and Orange County and St. Cloud. And I think there's at least one other party in there. Oh, Reedy Creek. The part of the time frame is the getting permitting for taking water out of the lower Florida aquifer, especially brackish water. And then the water treatment plant will be a reverse osmosis system. So the reject water is very salty. So then you have to find another location to inject the water back into the aquifer at a much deeper level, so that it has to be at least, I think, 10,000 milligrams per liter of chlorides in order to inject it. So finding the locations and testing that, and then getting the permits took most of the time. And then you can't really design a water plant until you get the source and the reject water planned and permitted. So that's the big reason that it has taken so much time, is the finding the appropriate locations and the getting the permits.
Okay, great. With one, okay, please clarify the meaning of the Wekiva River designation as a priority water body.
That's it was designated. It's been designated as a outstanding Florida water. If I said priority water body, I may have misspoke. I don't know the.
I think it's a
technical-
colloquial term used within the CFWI. It is considered a priority
Oh,
because of the MFL situation. But I don't think it's a legal term.
Mentioned that in that was my question, Mike. You mentioned that in one of your slides, that some type of protections had to be implemented for priority water bodies. And I thought I saw that somewhere, maybe in the CFWI, there were water bodies designated as priority. I forget what slide it was in, one of your previous slides. I think.
Well,
Deirdre,
outstanding Florida springs and outstanding Florida waterways would definitely be priority water bodies.
Yeah, it has that outstanding designation. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have a couple questions that are sort of the two questions that are kind of combined into one. And it says, like, can you elaborate a little bit on how water conservation will be implemented? I think you've talked a little bit about, you know, talking to HOAs and talking to cities,
Yeah.
but maybe there's some more you can illuminate us on
Yeah.
that a little bit. And then also,
Mhm.
it also seems like some kind of native ground cover lawn should be developed and mandated. So I think those two things kind of go hand in hand.
We have become, over the last number of years, much more robust in our expectations in a water conservation plan in the permit. So we're demanding a lot more. We're even starting to condition in, you must do certain things like passing a Florida-friendly landscape irrigation design ordinance. And one of the things we want to implement is, it's all very well to pass these codes and ordinances, but you have to enforce them. There's no point in we have a lot of really good codes on the books, but staff changes and priorities change, and they're just not being well enforced. You know, I'd like to call out City of Ocoee in Orange County as one of the hardest working cities in terms of enforcing their landscape irrigation codes. And it's really hard. They call me from the field all the time, and they've got an irrigation guy yelling at them because he disagrees with their code language and he wants to install that system a certain way. So sometimes cities back down and don't work as hard because it's really difficult getting all of these systems done correctly. So in our rule, becoming more and more robust all the time. Now that there are 3 of us and not just me in 18 counties, we're going to start doing, as soon as you receive your permit, the bigger utilities, we're going to start doing annual check-ins to make sure you're implementing the conservation programming. Last year, we launched a water conservation rebate program. It's a small program. We're hoping it'll grow. We copied it from SwiftMud. They call theirs the WISE program. And it is a rapid way to get rebate funds to a utility for very certain things like smart irrigation controllers, irrigation audits, so their staff can go out and inspect, compost, organic compost in new developments tilled into the soil, because we know from research that can save 50% of water use for the first 2 to 3 years. And this year we opened it up to HOAs. So no need to go through the utility. The HOA board can come straight to us And based on the feedback I got at the HOA Expo, we're going to be getting a lot of applications in. So we're trying to help fund it at the ground level to get these changes made. I coordinate a group of water conservation coordinators throughout the district, and we meet quarterly and we go on field trips and we all compare notes. What I've observed is they're a pretty competitive bunch. So when they hear that one utility is trying this new thing and it's working really well, when we come back the next time, they're all trying that new thing. So trying to create a community around conservation. Quite often, these conservation coordinators in a small city are one person, and what they do is affecting revenue. They are reducing revenue, so they're not always the most popular person in the utility. If they're good at what they do, they're hurting revenue for that utility. So we've created a kind of a community of water conservation to get standards out there. What else have we got going on? The HOAs are a really high priority for us. We are partnered with DEP. We just received funding to design a statewide campaign for irrigation water use messaging, which will be used by DEP, Florida-friendly utilities, water management districts. And we're hiring professionals this time. We're not going to come up with the campaign. We're going to hire marketing professionals to design it well. And regarding the turf grass, this is a pet peeve for me, and I'll get on my soapbox for a few minutes. St. Augustine doesn't waste water. The humans who operate the controller waste water. So, but that's easier said than done to fix. Today, I was out training inspectors in Polk County. It was a partnership with Southwest District, and the homes we were training them, we were training the builders. In Lake Wales, Florida Water Store is mandated, and we were training new inspectors because the program is just taking off there. Every single home had bahia, irrigated bahia in the front, unirrigated in the back. That is now mainstream in Polk County and becoming more common in Lake County and in parts of Marion County. So good old bahia grass that is truly the only species that is drought tolerant in the absence of irrigation. That said, there's lots of research going on right now on blended ground covers, taking some of our native species like mimosa and frog fruit and clovers and blending them and figuring out how to produce them on a massive scale. So the turfgrass research facility in Citra has all these test plots, and they're comparing growth of all of these ground covers as an alternative. There's in Lake County, actually, Cherry Lake Tree Farm is heavily involved in developing blended ground covers for use in yards. We have a builder in Polk County who's doing perennial peanut in front and side yards, and it's really successful in his development. So it's kind of an exciting time. There's lots going on with different ideas, because the builders are finally open to trying something different because the water isn't there.
Okay, great. Thank you for that great answer. I like that you are getting the utility managers in that competitive mode to see how they can all do better. That's really good.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't want to keep anyone's extra time. My question was answered. What do you think of peanut grass? So thank you for that. There are some people in Lake County who are using it. It's really very nice. I've got some friends on 14 acres, and they've got maybe about 5 acres that used to be just bahia, and it's sort of a mixture of peanut grass, and they mow it and it comes right back again, and they don't irrigate or water or anything.
And that's been the number one sales pitch this builder told us with his homes in Polk County is when you tell them that you mow 2 to 4 times a year, they're all about it, the homeowners.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you so much. I think Deirdre, Mike, and Jim would be available via email if anyone has any additional pressing questions. Also, we are going to have our Lake County Conservation Council meeting after this session, and Mike, can you make Jane the co-host, so she can come back on board. I'm not sure if Jane is a co-host.
She needs to be
Can
the
you hear
host.
me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you. Mhm.
Okay, good. Well, maybe the speakers could put their email addresses in the chat box. That would be very helpful. Okay, as I said earlier, everyone is welcome to stay for our meeting. We always need 10 people minimum for a quorum, so I hope we have at least 10, and I welcome a lot more too. Okay, I call this meeting to order.
Oh, Jane, I just wanted to thank our speakers once more. Thank you so much, Deirdre, excellent job. Mike, excellent job. And Jim, excellent job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
agree. I agree. I think we should all applaud,
Yeah.
even if we
Yay.
can't hear the applaud. We can see it. Thank
Wonderful
you.
information. Thank you.
It was very dense and lot to learn. So thank you.
And Deborah, you did a great job lining up the speakers. Thank you. Okay, I've called the meeting to order, and the minutes have been sent out to all the members. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of our last general membership meeting, which was September 18th of 2024? Hearing none, they stand approved as transmitted. I always like to make a quick report on what things have been happening. Sure most of you know that the public lands bond referendum passed with 80.06% of the vote, and our board recommended that people vote for that, so thank you. The Lady Lake Town Council refused to annex the old Carriage Museum property, most of which is in the Emeralda Rural Protection Area, so we're real pleased about that. Unfortunately, the developer has appealed, so we'll see where that goes. Lake County Conservation Council has sent letters opposing the Harbor Hills request to expand into the Emeralda Marsh area. We sent letters to the Lake County Board of County Commissioners and the Planning and Zoning Board, and that matter has now been postponed until January. So we'll keep you updated on what's going on with that. But it's nice when you get enough public outcry. Usually the developer, or often the developer, will ask for a postponement, which is nice. We put on a conservation workshop, and I'll get to questions in just a moment. Lake County Conservation Council Conservation Workshop on November 9th. 59 people attended, and I think it went very well. We had good speakers, good discussion. Our events chair, Catherine DeYoung, staffed our LCCC table at 3 events lately, and I want to thank her for doing that. That's a lot of work, but she's been doing a great job on it. Are there any questions on my report?
Jane, I wanted to add a point about the Harbor Hills. They want to take 1,500 acres out of the RPA. And the main reason it feels like it got tabled is because the county commission pointed out there were no rules or guidelines about how to take something out of an RPA. So they sent the county staff off to go make rules on how to remove something from an RPA. So we need to be very diligent about paying attention to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Jane, we're still recording. You're the host. You need to stop the recording.
Oh, all righty. Well, I will do that. Let's see. Because I don't know if I can do it quickly.
Can I make
that's
a
something we really need to.
request? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, Courtney, go.
I was just gonna say, anyone that does not have their name in or their last name in their little Zoom header, it would be really helpful for me doing the minutes if you could just put your name in the chat for me.
All righty. Is our treasurer online, Pam Adams? Okay, I do know that our balance as of the end of October was $3,692.84, and we currently have 64 members. Committee reports, Susan Fetter.
Sure.
Social media.
Social media. We have an Instagram account now. We're LC Conservation C on Instagram. I've made 2 whopping posts. If anyone is an Instagram expert and would like to become the official LC Instagram poster, that would be awesome. It's not too hard